What's going on, boys and girls? Welcome back to another episode of Eating Shit. What's going on, boys and girls? Welcome back to the Eating Shit podcast with your boy. If you're new here, the point of this show is to quickly come on here once a week and share the lessons I've learned with you guys in real time so you don't have to make the same dumbass mistakes that I have.
Stupid.
Or just learn from my experiences in general. If the episode provided value for you, share the show on your story or send it to someone you think you would benefit from it. And also throw up a 5-star review on the podcast app or smash the like button on YouTube to help us out with the organic, all that bullshit that every YouTuber says. All right, enough with the scripted part of the show. Let's hop right in. So lessons this week, I was just sitting here trying to come up with some stuff, some of the lessons that I have gotten this week. And I don't really have anything that was like property specific. But I was thinking about it. I was like, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be property specific every time. It just has to be a lesson that I got through whatever I was doing. So that's where we're going to go with this one this week. So this one, instead of being just about a property or about real estate in general, it was more so just like a lesson on mindset that I got. And mindset's an interesting thing because, it's always ongoing. It's not something like, something in real estate where you learn it and then it's like, oh, I got it. You don't like learn how to burr a fucking rental and then you have to keep learning over and over and over how to do it. Like, yeah, there's little nuances here and there that you might be able to improve upon each time you do it. But mindset, it's like, you have to always be intentional about working on it every single day. You can't just learn it and then, oh, I have a good mindset all of a sudden. So I was talking to my coach, Chris, about this on Thursday when we have our weekly calls. And I've touched on some of this that I'm about to talk about in the first episode of this podcast when I went through my entire backstory. So you guys can go back and listen to that one if you have not yet. But essentially what we were talking about, our calls are kind of funny because they always just go, I don't know, he even said on this call, he was like, this is not the direction I was expecting this call to go. I don't know where he thinks like they're going to go, but that happens to me a lot too. That's why it's kind of funny where it's like, you think you want to talk about one thing, but then you start talking about something else and then you just go down this rabbit hole because that's what is needed to be talked about on the call. So I start talking about like this mindset type stuff and, what I touched on in the first episode of this podcast was mindset and conditioning. And this is stuff that I've worked on with Chris a lot in the past where it's like your conditioning is really the reason why you are the way that you are right now. And, conditioning has been happening your entire life and continues to happen right now, whether you know it or not. So it's interesting that sometimes you can look back on certain events in your life and pinpoint them like, yup, that is the moment that changed me, and that's why I think this way. And then there's other things like every single one of your behaviors, like probably for 80-90% of them, you don't really know why you act the way that you do, but it happened from conditioning, whether that was like what your parents taught you or like something that happened at school or with another kid or whatnot, or even, way more recently, like it doesn't have to happen when you're young. But with an improving mindset, a lot of it is actually getting over that type of conditioning. So that's what I deal with all the time. And it's kind of funny because like when I started talking to him about this, I brought up this guy that I'll get into him right after I go through this stuff with you guys. But, I told Chris, I was like, I guess I started with it by telling him like, I feel exactly the same right now as I did 5 years ago. And I feel exactly the same then as I did, 10 years ago or whatnot, which is not exactly true when I really think about how I felt then and how I felt 10 years ago, 10 years ago. It's not exactly the same as I feel right now, not even close. But for whatever reason, like I just think that I feel exactly the same all the time. So I guess like I started talking about that type of stuff. And then I told Chris, I was like, this whole time obviously I have a way better mindset right now than I did, 2 years ago, than I did 5 years ago, than I did 10 years ago. But I've always felt this entire time that I'm like very close to some sort of breakthrough, or like there's just one little thing that's missing. And if I just had that thing, then, everything that I want to happen would come true. And, the whole point of hiring coaches like this are they ask the right questions, because a lot of times the way that they ask a question, it just makes you think about it in a different way, and it forces you to respond. And what he said to that was, he was like, he'll reiterate the point, like, so you feel like you're missing, there's just something that you're missing. I'm like, yeah. And he was like, well, what if there's not? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's just like, what if there's not something that you're missing? And it's funny because we specifically brought up like confidence. And this is something that I have always struggled with. And it's kind of funny because I get all the time, like people that I don't really know that well or whatnot, all the time people say, I don't know how you're so confident, or like how did you become so confident? Where does your confidence come from? And stuff like that. And that's why it's funny, because like when I view myself as like not a confident person. And I have talked to Chris specifically about this before as well, where, he's like, no, you are confident. And that's exactly what we started talking about here too. And it's like, both of those things are true. Or it's like, how can both of those things be true, really? Where it's like, how can these people that either know you or even don't really know you, but they see your shit online or they talk to you or whatnot, and they say, wow, how did you become so confident? Where did you get your confidence from? And then also yourself, you can say, oh, I'm not confident. I'm not a confident person. And it's like, which one is real and which one isn't? It's like, well, they both are. And as cliche as it sounds, it's like, it's whichever one that you believe in. And I don't know where the fuck that came from. That's why I brought up conditioning. Like, oh, I don't have the confidence or whatnot. So I don't have a pinpoint moment where it's like, that's where you became not confident as a person. But the moral of the story is, it's all bullshit, because like, I think that the other people are probably more right than I am, because I'm just living with 31 years of conditioning of being, oh, I'm just not like that confident of a person. And then there's people that see you from the outside and they're like, I wish I had that dude's confidence. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is like, I know this, something that I learned. I have known this before, and now it's just getting brought up again. But working on shit like this is not something that it's like, I learned it, now I'm ultra confident all of a sudden. Like, it's something that you have to keep on fucking working on. And so not only just improving the mindset and like gaining like positive mindset things, but also removing the negative mindset things or the negative conditioning. And it's really fucking hard. Those of you that actually work on this stuff like I do, you guys know that it is difficult to like disassociate with those disempowering thoughts. But it's super necessary. Like, no matter what you're doing, you do have to like disassociate with that shit, or you just cannot take steps forward. And my partner actually struggles with this stuff a lot more than I do. But I still, so like when he comes to me and like wants to talk about that type of stuff, like I get it. I don't get it to the degree that he has to struggle with it, but I still understand because I struggle with it too. But I did think that was an interesting lesson. I just wanted to bring that up to you guys about like the conditioning and like whatever type of, even if you don't think it's like a negative thing, I think a lot of people like when you say negative, it doesn't have to be like, oh, like I suck, or like a demeaning negativity. Like, I think that a negative mindset in some ways is like stuff that I still struggle with. Like, oh, like I'm not a confident person or whatnot. Like, it's not like I tell myself that all the time, like, oh, you're not confident, so you can't do that. But it is something that is the conditioning. So it's like ingrained, and it is something that you like have to deal with and overcome. So for me, I just have to be more intentional about removing that negative conditioning and replacing it with the positive conditioning. But it's going to just be an ongoing battle, like forever. It's not something I can just switch on. It's not something even in a week, 7 days, a month of thinking like this that it'll be fixed. It's just going to be ongoing forever. So hopefully you guys can take something from that and build upon that with whatever the fuck you're struggling with too. The person I wanted to bring up and why I actually brought this up to Chris, and I've talked to Wes, my partner, about this guy as well. This guy's also, his name is also Wes, but his name's Wes Watson. I'm sure that, some of you guys listening to this have probably already heard him or heard of him because he's got a pretty big social media following. If you haven't, definitely go check him out. He is, I think if you're listening to this, you'll probably have no problem with him. Like anyone that has a problem with the way that I talk or deliver information, they're not going to be fucking listening to this anyway, but they would definitely have a problem with how he does it. This dude used to be, he was in prison for 10 years and he's been out for like 4 or 5 years and he's just like crushing it. But he's got some great messages on mindset. And I've been listening to a lot of his shit this week, and that was another reason why I wanted to bring this up. Like, he's like pretty gnarly in the way that he delivers his message on this stuff. But what I specifically wanted to bring up to you guys about him, it makes a lot of sense on why he is the way that he is, just with his background. Because if you've been in prison for 10 years, I think he was in solitary confinement for like 2 of those years or some shit, like went through crazy stuff. And his prison stories are fucking awesome. Just like super, super captivating because it's like so far away from anything that I've experienced. But it makes a lot of sense, like why he is so like driven and urgent about things. And that's one thing, like the title of this podcast, Eating Shit. Like I don't know if it's a unique ability, but I do have the ability to eat shit for as long as it takes. A lot of people don't have that. They want instant gratification or at least fairly quickly gratification, and I will just eat shit forever. But with that, I've always missed on like being hyper urgent about things because I have the ability to play long indefinitely. My ability to play short is not as urgent as it should be. And if it was, I would be much farther ahead than I am right now. So it makes a lot of sense. Someone with his background, when he literally had his entire life taken away from him, now that he's out, hyper urgent. And then plus with the mindset that he built, being in prison and being intentional and working on all of this stuff, that's much different than me. But you can imagine, like, if you guys have ever been through like a health scare or something like that, when you're going through it, it's kind of like there's an old like Buddhist thing that my partner Wes has told me about before. It's like the toothache scenario. And I'm just paraphrasing this, but it's like when you have a toothache, it's like an old Chinese proverb or some shit. But when you have a toothache, all you can think about is like the toothache and how terrible it is. And like, oh, if I only didn't have this toothache, like everything would be good. And I think everyone has experienced this, like when they're sick or whatever, like everything is fucking terrible when you're sick. And like, oh, if you just weren't sick today, you could just be in the gym or crushing it or whatever. But then like, as soon as you're not sick or as soon as you don't have the toothache, you're right back to just being like the same lazy piece of shit that you have always been. So I guess that's probably why people fucking go to prison and then go right back also. Like, oh, if I could just get out of here, I'd be so successful. And then boom, they're right back in. But he took that same type of thinking and then actually did a lot with it. And so like, I guess that having that as his baseline is what I'm trying to say. Like literally not like take your freedom taken away from you, all your possessions taken away from you for 10 years straight. And then being in an environment where it's like all out war all the time between like all the gangs and all this crazy shit in the stories that he has, makes a lot of sense that like that baseline paired up with his mindset is just like recipe for hyper success through that hyper urgency. Like, I'm out, now I'm going to crush it every single day, like no matter what. So if you guys are struggling with anything about mindset and stuff like that, definitely look him up. I specifically listened to him, Wes Watson, on Brad Lee's podcast, which was really good. He goes on some fucking awesome rants right there. And then he was also on Andy Frisella's podcast a little bit earlier last year. That was a good one too. I went on there. I haven't dug too deep into his stuff, but I just listened to those few episodes, and I listened to him on Fighter and the Kid. It's a comedy podcast, but like they just keep fucking talking over each other, so it wasn't that good, but still some good prison stories on there too. So hopefully those are a couple lessons that you guys can take with you this week. And then as far as the wins section here, one small win for us, we are selling our last flip tomorrow. It's supposed to close Monday. So this was the last one that we were holding when the market shifted back in June. I actually just got back to the office from shooting a vlog over there, which will be out not this coming week, but the week after that. So you guys will be able to, see the after product of this flip. It was like an $80,000 remodel. So it looks really, really nice. And then I went through the whole story on like why we still have it 11 months later. There's a lot of drama with this deal and a lot of things we did wrong, but it's over. We're not making any money on it. It's basically a break-even deal for us. But the way that we funded it, we did $220,000 private money, which was the entire purchase price, and then we cash flowed the rehab. So because we've put $80,000 into it, we're actually going to be getting that back at closing. So even though our profit will be zero on the deal, we'll still be getting, $80,000 back tomorrow, which will be nice for our cash position. And then, we'll use that for marketing and whatnot going into the new wholesaling market in Jacksonville. We're hitting that hard tomorrow. Everything's set up. We're ready to go. But that's a good feeling to have that last one wrapped up. And now we have no more short-term debt, no more high interest debt. We just have the long-term debt that's on the stabilized rentals that we refied last year or the year before or something like that. So basically just wholesaling from here on out, no more flips until the market gets a little bit more stable and we feel more confident in where the after repair value is going to be on some of these things, and we can start buying again. So yeah, that about wraps it up for this episode. I guess we'll see you next week. And I got nothing else for you guys. I'm just drawing a blank right now. But we'll see you next week on next episode. And then I'll get some more lessons to share with you guys. Thanks.